Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am very glad to welcome both halves of the audience. I will not forget you in any case. Thank you very much for being with us today. We have a big conversation today. And today we are talking about immortality and about the magnificent works of art. This is what the exposition imitates, whether it is the hypostyle hall of the temple in Abydos, which you see now, the 13th century BC, or the more well-known colonnades of the temple of the god Amun in Karnak. But this path to the sanctuary and this incredible ray of light, which passes through special light windows inside the secret space of the temple, is similar to how it is connected, according to the legend, the god of the sun, Ra, with the body of Osiris. When we look at the Egyptian texts, we do not see a story about horror. We see a story about the movement to the light. And even the Book of the Dead is just a copy of the Arabic Book of the Dead Man. And in ancient times it was called Ra-Unuber et Emheru, the speech of the exit to the light of the day. And this exit to the light of the day is shown in a brilliant hint at the exhibition that we will walk through today. Let's take a look at Maha himself. He is incredibly good. We must understand that throughout the many millennia of the history of the development of the Egyptian civilization, the style, fashion, elements of the funeral ritual have changed. Roughly speaking, the sarcophagus can be said in terms of style and details about its time. The amazing black sarcophagi in the middle of the New Kingdom are very decorative. But here, look at his eyes, the white of the alabaster, the pupil of the obsidian, the edging of the cosmetic eye and eyebrows of the blue glass, the smile. This is what should remain in eternity, because I repeat again, this is the same cover, the same machine, the ritual machine that was supposed to ensure the dead man's immortality. He must go through all the trials. He must go so that at this moment the mummy and his body do not touch the decomposing. And due to the fact that the decomposing does not touch the body, due to the embalming, the soul, so to speak, very simplified, the soul easily separates from the body and easily goes through all the trials of the new world. There will be a funeral trial, there will be a hanged heart, there will be an excuse. Maybe there will be an excuse for what every dead Egyptian hopes for, which means that if it happens, then a bird with a human head, Ba, the entity that is closest to the European understanding of the soul, will return to his body, will recognize him by the burial mask and whisper to his ear so eagerly that he has become Mahiru, the right voice, the right-voiced one, who has conquered death, who has circumcised the resurrection and has completely reawakened with Osiris, the god of eternal life. On the side walls of the sarcophagus, let's look at it again, it's very beautiful. Again, these ribbons seem to transform into a spell. And here is a fragment from the deceased texts. The god is the great ruler of wisdom. Here are the great defenders of the deceased son of Yahor, four spirits, the guards of the northern part of the sky, the patron of embalming. I will tell you about it. That is literally every centimetre of this absolutely amazing work of art is all covered with texts, covered with magnificent monuments of religious thought and hope for eternal life. Unfortunately, the mummy of Mahiru did not reach our time, and when Glinichev bought this amazing monument in Luxor, the sarcophagus was offered to him empty. And today, when we are going to walk around the exhibition, then you and I will have not only great monuments, not only grandiose concepts, but also incredible European vandalism. It was European vandalism at the end of the 19th century when a man delighted with ancient art took an axe in his hand, carved reliefs, bought masks torn from sarcophagi, and sometimes forgot that this is not just a work of art, but that this is someone's personal dream of immortality. And here it's very important to mention one more thing. On this sarcophagus, which fortunately has been preserved, the name of the person to whom it belonged is repeated. The whole Egyptian concept of cultural memory is based on the principle of pronunciation of Ren. Ren is a name. You pronounce a name, and in a different way you remember this deceased person. Egyptian texts say that the living soul still remembers you on earth. And on the one hand, when we see this whole monument and we remember this name, in fact, we fulfill the wishes of the ancient Egyptians who dreamed that their names would be repeated. And on the other hand, the number of monuments damaged when a mask is torn from a sarcophagus is not only a violation of the cultural context, which is certainly true, it is also the destruction of the purpose with which this monument was created. Not just as a work of art, and not as a work of art, but as a part of the machine for immortality that was supposed to bring a person to eternal life. One of the most amazing monuments that can finally be seen in the exhibition of the museum at this exhibition is the mask of the most majestic sarcophagus we have just seen with you. It is absolutely amazing. It was already bought with the very clay, as they often write in books on archaeology, in a ruined state. And the long dream of many decades of the museum's life was the restoration of the mask, but there was no money for this masterpiece. And finally, what has changed a lot, the monument was absolutely amazing, restored, and again a golden face, and despite the damage of the nose, this smile that barely plays on the lips. Because again, this is the most ideal image of the golden of the most immortal spirit that the deceased should become. A wide necklace of moustache on his shoulders. But here, I want to tell you one very important thing. When we come to the museum, we must be prepared. Because the more you prepare for a trip to the museum, the more you will find out in the museum itself. And very often, looking at the monuments of antiquity, we see a label that says Maskomahu, and we think, oh, that's what the mask was like. No. On the right is the state in which it has been stored for many decades, and on the left, the perfect analogue of the collection of the Metropolitan Museum, the Mask of Master Amenhotep. This mask, like a case, should be put on the monument. Now, looking at the mask, you understand how hard it was to work on a very good restore, because this whole back part was not preserved. Egypt is always symmetrical. We know this. In Egyptian art, this is one of the basic rules. Egypt is always whole. We will talk a lot today about wholeness. Therefore, very often when we look at a monument in a museum, we should think about what it really was like when it was conceived by a master, what it was like initially. We are moving along the gallery and we go around the White Hall. This is a large exposition of the most diverse masks. This is what I admire. The masks are very different eras. There are a lot of monuments of Greek, Rome and Egypt at this exhibition. And this is about the 4th and 1st centuries BC, when Egypt was already under a very large influence of the Hellenistic civilization. But there are also very ancient things. And you know, it's amazing what makes this exhibition very alive. And there are a lot of faces, and when you walk around and look at these faces, there is no cultural barrier, no language barrier, no other belief barrier. There is a person in front of you. How did the ancient master, somewhere we can read his name, somewhere we can say where he lived, somewhere, in rare cases, we can even tell a minimal story about this person, but you look through the glass into the faces of people who existed several millennia ago. And this is a completely amazing feature of Egyptian culture, because the Egyptian climate, the Egyptian religious consciousness, the Egyptian practice of preserving the history of man allows you to look into the faces of people who lived many millennia ago, and sometimes look at their mummies, at the reconstruction of what no other culture of antiquity can afford. Let's look at these masks, and these masks are very different. I'll show you some of them. This is my personal choice. Maybe you'll like others at the exhibition. But, for example, this one. And this is a mask from a sarcophagus. When you look at this very noble wooden face from the 6th to the 4th centuries BC, you have to imagine that it was actually a painted sarcophagus. There were names on it, and there was a tomb around it. And in general, this mask was chosen by this man and his relatives, and they looked carefully at whether it reflected his face. If you look closely, there are fragments of painting on the forehead, because it was a wig, and there were painted ribbons on the wig. Someone in the 19th century just tore the mask off the sarcophagus and sold it to European collectors. There are a lot of such torn masks and sarcophagi. We have to separate the mask from the sarcophagus, and the burial mask that is put on the mummy itself, which is placed either in the sarcophagus or in the cover. For example, this one. This is the Greco-Roman era, the 1st century BC, the 1st century AD. It is a parable, dark blue hair, because in Egypt, dark blue is the colour of the hair of the gods, and a golden face. In general, when we talk about Egypt, we look into these faces, and when we looked at the face of Mahu, gold played on the face. Not because it is a precious material, not because Egypt was a country rich in gold. In Nubia, there were famous gold mines, thanks to which we see incredible, massive masterpieces in the same tomb of Tutankhamun, made of precious metal. And the most important thing is that gold was a symbol of immortality, which means immortality. According to the legends of the gods, the flesh is golden, and therefore the ideal dead, which is dead for us and which is eternally born for the world, who won death again, he has a golden flesh, because this flesh will not change, will not be tainted. It will become eternal, the same as the flesh of the gods. Another mask with magnificent encrusted eyes, also late. But look at the hope in this face, how open the eyes are, because these are also the ritual gates of the human essence. According to the legend, a part of the human essence comes out and enters through the eyes, so they are always so voluminous, emphasized and fulfilled. And then on the wigs of the wig that go down, here's the sun god and the great gods, the 9 queens of heaven, who will judge the dead. On the left side, here the god Hor honours Osiris, his father, Osiris, the treasurer of another world. Hor, the king of this world, his incarnation is every Egyptian king. And on the other hand, again, Osiris is revered by the jackal-headed Anubis, his other son, who was the main god of the Egyptian concept of balsam, who once made the first mummy of the body of the killed Osiris. And since then, under his leadership, in the process of the burial ritual, a mummy of each person is made. And the Greeks once said that they were very impressed in ancient Egypt, how much the gods in Egypt are close to people. They have not seen anything like this in Greece, in their Greek ecumenism. And in this phrase, in fact, there is a subtext, because Many aspects of the Egyptian burial ritual are a dramatic ritual. Well, what does it mean? It means that the priests who participate in it have been preparing for a very long time, starting from the fasts, the anointing, the shaving of the bodies, up to the fact that certain images are written in green paint on the tongue before reading a certain text. And then their task is not just to do everything right under the leadership of the high priest, the priest, but to make the gods enter their bodies at the time of the ritual service. And with their hands, they did what was necessary. That is why when the high priest, the embalmer, the heresy, the one who secretly puts on the mask of Anubis, it is not to depict Anubis, but in order for Anubis to enter from the ancient point of view, he identified him, put him in his body, and did everything that he once did for Osiris himself. Look at this wonderful face, this amazing mask. Even when I worked for 6 years in the Department of the East of the Pushkin Museum, I was puzzled why this thing was not in the exhibition, because it is an absolutely amazing monument, also from the 1st century BC. Look at this smile, these magnificent living looking at you eyes. And on the forehead of this young man is a magnificent solar disc, choir of Berditsky, a winged solar disc, one of the forms of the sun, or a protector of the sun god from the forces of chaos. This is what should shake off the darkness of the night. This is what should bring this person closer to the rise, to the resurrection of the sun. And here we will ask ourselves another museum question, because when we look at a monument, we often get carried away by its beauty and do not ask ourselves what it looked like initially. You see how many fragments there are on the face. That is, someone who sold it in the 19th century, someone just cut it out because it was easier to sell the face. I'll show you how this thing originally looked like the Cairo Egyptian Museum. Oh, how! A completely different image, right? And this is again about how fragile the legacy is, how carefully you need to treat monuments so that they reach our time. Such masks were made in the upper Egyptian city of Ahmad. We will talk a lot about Ahmed today. This is a few hours drive north of Luxor, and here too you see only a golden solar disc, but approximately the same decoration, a very close analogue. The Anubis jackals sit in the middle of the wig, and below the goddess of the sky Nud, the mother of Osiris, the great mother of stars, she holds in her hands 2 trident feathers. One trident feather is Mat, truth, order, lawfulness. This is the feather with which the heart of the deceased will be weighed on the great tomb. The second feather is Shu. This is air, because when we are alive, we breathe. The Egyptians believed in the concept of Chaunang, the breath of eternal life, which is passed on to the god Zar, and the Tsar passes it on to all his subjects. Breathing in, we live. Not breathing in, we do not live. Moving, we are alive. When we are motionless, we are not alive. On these completely basic ideas, the main characteristics of life and death, many great religious concepts of ancient Egypt are built. One of the famous monuments of the Egyptian collection is Golenish Chevo. It is very late. This is already Roman times. This is one of the several admirable feathers which were used to cover the mummy. Let's see what is depicted here. But first, perhaps, I will tell you a story. After all, Vladimir Semyonovich had an Egyptian museum on Mukovaya Street, House 15 in St. Petersburg. He built it on purpose. Unfortunately, it did not survive. This house was rebuilt in later times when he sold it. And magnificent, with a glass ceiling, according to the best European samples of that time. The museum built was filled with these treasures. And on Wednesdays, as you know, The owner himself gave free tours and showed his collection. When Golenishtchevo hung this feather in the house, terrible rumours went around St. Petersburg that Golenishtchevo's house is incredibly Egyptian dead, and with an incredible look from which grandmothers faint, from which just some kind of horror for everyone who is only familiar with this collection. In fact, with such a mystical spirit, we must understand that this is the beginning of the 20th century, the very time of mysticism, the twinkling of the tables, and the evocation of spirits. So it is clear why, with such a mystical look, St. Petersburgers were inspired by the appearance of this feather in the Egyptian museum. In the centre of the dead, he is dressed in Roman clothes. In his hands is a scroll, apparently a book of the dead, or some other religious text. To the left of him is Osiris, who is depicted as a mummy in the crown of Athens. To the right of him is Anubis, and here Anubis as an intermediary, as a conductor between our world and the world of others. He is such a grandiose, absolute figure, depicted with a solar disc on his head. Behind him is the exit from the temple, or the passage to the other world. The hieroglyphic inscription is read, "There's a blessing on behalf of Osiris." Nearby there are not only the sacred cobras of Uri, archers and various spirits, but also many tiny black men who touch the mummy with the long hands. The spirits of Duat, the world praise, that's what the Egyptians called the afterlife. They are ready to take him on the other side. After all, if you look carefully now, you will see that in fact the bottom of this damaged cobra is a boat. It is a crossing, and they are standing on a boat, and Anubis gives it to Osiris, God without death. He is ready to take him there. The spirits of the other world, and this look of a forgiving person who leaves us there to the world of the dead. I will show you a large fragment because it is a very, very beautiful monument. Look what a portrait face, what an exceptional work. The museum collection has several amazing cobras. Not many collections in the world can boast of such cobras, but this famous cobra is a classic monument that descends from the pages of albums and from the pages of books dedicated to Egyptian art. Another cobra, but we are moving on, and for us, of course, it will be very important to understand what meanings are embedded in this sarcophagus. Not just a bank, not just a keeper of life, not just a capsule of eternity, but the story of a particular person. The 2nd century BC is a noble lady. Her name was Tashet. The sarcophagus has the names of her father and mother, and according to the style of decoration and the names, it is clear that this is the same city of Amim, where the god Men, the god of fertility, was worshipped. Before we look at it, we must also pay attention to the fragment of the Book of the Dead, which hangs above it. Let's take a closer look. So here is Tashet herself. We will now return to this sarcophagus. This is one of the most beautiful sarcophagi in the museum collection. But first, a fragment of the Book of the Dead, which hangs above it, the parable of the sunrise. The chapters that form a kind of guide for the soul of the deceased, they lead him through the secret areas of the world, conduct him through the tomb, give him hope, give him protection. Such a scroll, but this scroll is later. It is already in Ptolemaic time. That is somewhere between the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC. But there are also famous scrolls of the classical era of the rule of the pharaohs. Let's see what is here. Here in the left part, the deceased himself, his gods and goddesses lead to a mummy-like figure with a falcon's head. This is the bird Sakar Osiris. The bird is the great ruler of the secrets of the earth. Sakar is the god of death. Osiris is the god of resurrection. It combines a single principle of resurrection and regeneration. It stands before the deceased, which raises his hands in the pose of prayer, in the pose of adoration. The Egyptian prayer is the hands turned by the palms to the one who's the object of prayer, the god of death and his prayer. I will probably surprise many if I remind you. We all know that each Egyptian deity has its own sacred animal, its own sacred plant, many of its sacred attributes. So the sacred plant of Sakar is an onion, because the onion seems dead. But when you plant it in the ground, water it, a bright green sprout appears from it, the green colour of eternal life. And also in the temple of Sakar is huge Lodia Hanun, on which a sacred image was sometimes taken out of the temple. It consists of the bones of animals, because it is death. On the nose and on the stern are the skulls of ibex or oryx, desert antelopes, and in the centre is a huge mound of sand. But there's either an egg or a grain in this hill, because the Egyptian concept of eternal life is that in death there is already life, sleeping, inert, unawakened, incomprehensible. And on the one hand, bones and a huge grave mound, and on the other hand, an egg in which life pulsates, or even just a grain, which the Egyptians called nepra and considered the symbol of the god Osiris. After all, if you throw a grain into the ground and water it, a green sprout will appear again. In the large hall, 7 cows and 1 bull are depicted. This is one of the readings of the Book of the Dead, which speaks of the impregnation of the deceased. Because just like here, there he will need to be fed, there he would need to be sacrificed, and these 7 cows and bulls were associated, including with the rhythm of the Nile, because in ancient times when there was no dam, this is from the stele of the Egyptologists who lived in the first half of the 20th century. For 7 years the Nile rises to the perfect height, and 7 years is another cycle. Either it has risen insufficiently, or it washes away everything. Remember later, this will turn into a biblical tradition in the dreams of Joseph about cows and bulls. This is from here, from the Book of the Dead, and next to it are 4 oars, 4 sides of the world. These oars give the deceased the opportunity to be Shemsura, the companion of the sun, to walk with them in the sunbed, and to be invisible, as the Book of the Dead says, for his enemies. Each of these many readings is incredible, not just a guide, but a tool for the soul, which must find immortality and which must receive support during very difficult trials that divide our world, the court of Osiris or the heavenly fields of Sahitir. Let's go back to our beauty, whose name is Tashet, when we look at her tanned face. But first of all, I will say that in this sarcophagus there was clay bought in a mumia. You will see mumia in the edition that came out of the collection. I fully comply with all copyrights here. What you see on the screen is a purely copyrighted video, but mumia is a magnificently tanned man, or in ancient times an unused sarcophagus was used for someone from the family. Or rather even something else. Rather, in the 19th century, a sarcophagus was put by someone else, because selling a sarcophagus with a mummy is more expensive than just a sarcophagus or just a mummy. And because, of course, if you think of such a luxurious coffin from Mrs. Taché, it is unlikely that you would give it away, because such a work was very expensive. Let's see what we see here. So again, a golden face, the colour of immortality. Then a wide necklace. On the wide necklace hangs a large pectoral. In the pectoral image of the gods, Each of the gods holds in his hands a grey feather, a symbol of Tashaig's justification in the afterlife. Then remember, just a few minutes ago I told you that Mumia lies and all the other components of a person lie in the tomb. Imagine they are waiting in the silence. Will it be justified or not? Will it come or not? It was necessary to make a magical message of help for the soul to return. And here on top, next to the solar disk, you see a bird with a human head, and this bird holds in its wings 2 grey feathers. This is the same Ba. This is the soul that has returned to the body in order to inform about justification. And then the solar disk and the great amulet symbol of great sacrifice and protection, which I will tell you about a little later. We move on and see a huge figure of the goddess of the sky, Nuta, the great mother of stars, the eternal sky. She is the mother of every dead, just like the mother of Osiris, the first god who won death. And again, look, the sun rises, and again 2 feathers, again truth and air, breath and victory. Then again, she is the goddess Nuta. Her body is very beautifully decorated with stars. She leans over the ground, and Osiris lies on the ground inside his sarcophagus. Just like she leans over Osiris, she leans over every dead, and the soul of the dead flies here and holds 2 Apahalahu in 2 hands. Apahalahu transmits the breath of eternal life. Everything is in motion here. Everything speaks of life. And next to the Great Mother, the older spirits, they all go with staffs. This is the sign of Tser. This is the elder, that is, the older revered souls take this Osiris Atashet in their circle. We move on with you. And here is the scene of embalming. Anubis holds a cup in his hands with the heart of the dead. He, Anubis, is the first from the divine canopy. And under such a canopy, embalming was done, and such a canopy was placed directly in front of the tomb before the burial in order to make certain last ceremonies in it. But is the dead lying in his canopy? No, he is eternally alive. He lies on his stomach. This is a classic image of the revived. The dead is lying on his back. The awake is lying on his stomach. And he raises his head in the direction of the priest who reads sacrificial formulas. A little further are the gods of Duat. And here begins the next register with such a road of pink-red colour, which zigzag-shaped envelopes this space. This is the 4th and 5th hours of the night. This is the great kingdom of Saqqara. This is a fragment of the famous text of Anduat, that which is in the tomb, when the impenetrable darkness begins, and darkness is death. And the darkness is such that the sun god who moves through this space on his boat, he can illuminate only a small part of this space with his light. Waters on the other side of the rivers dry up. Everything becomes fiery sand, and the boat itself turns into a snake that slides through this space. And there is a huge hill in the centre of this space, and the sun god listens to this hill, and inside the hill is the body of Osiris, and the heart beats in the body of Osiris. And when he hears a heartbeat, he knows that death has not come, and that life is eternal. And then, at the next 5 o'clock in the night, Ra, the sun god, and the soul of the pre-eternal god, according to the Egyptian ideas, will unite again with Osiris, which is the body of the pre-eternal god, the body and essence of a single, indivisible, unrecognizable, pre-eternal god, which the Egyptians called by the epithet Neberjer, the ruler of everything to the limit, because it is impossible to understand him. He is the source of all life, and at this moment he creates another day cycle for all living beings to live in this space. And look, here we go with you. Is there anything about death? No. Life, life, life. And then this is what we see. And now imagine our Tashet, who did not die at all from the point of view of ancient Egypt. She is eternal. She is always alive. She lies in her sarcophagus and she looks at the foot of her own tomb. And there's something very important in order to convince her that she is immortal. The ruler of millions of years, the ruler of the sun, the god of the air, Hashu, spreads his arms. On his head is the sign of K, the sign of vitality. And the sign of K dissolves the flower of the water lily. From the flower of the water lily appears the sign of Jet, which means the invulnerability of the pillars of this world. From there appear scorpions with a human head. This is the sun, but this is the Tashet itself, which, like the sun, must rise on the eastern horizon of the sky, which means to go through the cycle and in no case die and be reborn. Then the sun, Scorpion, holds the solar disk itself. The snake is the goddess of protection. The names of Isidah and Nephthida are signed. Next to the sacred shrine of the city of Abydos is the rise of the sun. And here lies the Tashet with his sarcophagus and looks at how it rises on the horizon of the sky. A sign that she is immortal, a sign that death is stolen and life is eternal. This is the same Tashet sarcophagus. I like this shot. This is the bottom of the sarcophagus, and this is the bottom from the outside. Let's look at the bottom. Above is the snake Apop, the symbol of chaos, a one-armed brother and at the same time a terrible enemy of the sun, with whom the sun fights every night. At a certain time of the night, the sun and his companions defeat Apop. Apop lies cut in half. Chaos is overcome. The great order has been restored. The sun goes on with its functions. The merciful goddess of breath appears, which with wide stitches sews back the body of the snake Apop. Because if Apop will not chase the sun, then the sun will stop. A symbol of the life of our world in the struggle of contradictions. The sun fights with the snake. The snake chases the sun. This is a huge cycle. As the Egyptians said, the time of infinity in which we live. And there is another time of the afterlife, where there is light, where there are dead, where there is no pain, where there is no death, where only eternal life. Two times of this world, which are connected with the soul of the pre-eternal God, and accordingly with Osiris, with the Lord of another world. The mother of Noth, the mother of Osiris, look how intimately in her embrace her children take this mummy. Here the name of the goddess Noth is written in a sun disk on her head, and next to it too, Noth, the great goddess, coming out of the Duat, written in the line of the hieroglyphic text next to it. She comes out of the Duat to accept in her embrace this dead Tashet, because she is her beloved, her own daughter, the embodiment of Osiris, her own child. And there's another sarcophagus in this part of the exhibition. And again we have the Book of the Dead and a magnificent monument to the collection of Vladimir Grinishchov. And if you look at this sarcophagus, unfortunately, it is not so well preserved. It was originally not just black, it was painted in a black tone with yellow paints. Only fragments of the painting remained. So it is written there that this sarcophagus belongs to the hostess of the House of Karama. Tashet was the previous mummy. And the face, you see yellow gold, it is a female face, unlike the red-brown male face. And for a long time it was believed that the mummy that lies there is the very same Karama. It turned out to be not at all. I will tell you the exact data that I got from the Kurchatov Institute. The mummy is a male. The sarcophagus is from the Teramenev era, that is from the 3rd, 2nd century BC. The mummy did not belong to the sarcophagus. The life expectancy is 150 centimeters. She died at 20 or 25 years old. Very young according to her standards, not average according to the standards of the ancient world. They had a different life expectancy. Why Amim? Before I tell you what we see here, why Ahim again? Because Egypt did not bear the Hellenistic world. And when after Alexander its capital appeared, Alexandria in the text, it is called Alexandria ad Egyptum, Alexandria under Egypt and not in it. And there in Febade, in Upper Egypt, were the ancient temples, were the royal tombs, were the great shrines, the people who lived there. These kings who did not know the Egyptian language received vulgar nicknames. They were not kings, they were not pharaohs, they were not living gods. And all the time while there was Alexandria, there were uprisings in Upper Egypt. And from time to time, the local families constantly tried to put their real Egyptian pharaoh. It is clear that it was a terrible war. They were suppressed from time to time, but due to the fact that there was a political centre that accumulated from a political point of view, national culture, it is there that the very last centres of ancient Egyptian religion, magic, which came through the Greek era and through Christianity even to the Muslim Egypt of the 7th century AD. And in the early Christian era, there is such a circle of the Sister Theosophia, the famous Egyptian priestess, although her name is already used, who tried to support the Egyptian cults, who tried to keep this pot with fire and coals of the Egyptian tradition. That is why in Amen, which few people know now because it is a huge preserved city, on top of which there is a modern Muslim cemetery with a hill, and only fragments are excavated. There are colossal royal statues and temples going into the sand under this necropolis. Amen is a great legend of the archaeology of the future. It was there that the best works of art were made, including the burial inventory during their time, deliberately ascending to the ancient Egyptian tradition, deliberately non-Greek. Therefore, when Vladimir Semyonovich Golenishev settled in Amen, he bought a lot of such absolutely amazing things there. By things, I mean the sarcophagus and the body, of course, he also bought. Let's look at the face. Again, not gold, simpler but still bright yellow. This is gold and the colour of a woman's skin. Open eyes, ears that hear prayers, and the voice of his mouth. Magnificent works of art. And we look at one of the papyruses. The papyrus collection in the Museum of Fine Arts is huge. It is traditionally not exhibited much, but this is correct because the papyrus schedule burns out very much. It cannot be kept for a long time because the ink is all based on soot. And here, before the god of the sun, who sits in another world, so he is also embalmed like a mummy. He has an embalmed body. There's a priestess, Jed Yesida Yusang. She said, Yesida, she will live. The priestess in festive clothes, she has a festive and romantic horse head. She brought a bouquet of flowers to God, a bouquet of Nile lilies and nymphs. Her eternal life depends on his decision. And on her chest hangs an amulet of the heart, the very heart that the Egyptians considered the source of thought, feeling, the vessel in which life and experience are accumulated, and thus the vessel that will be hung in the afterlife. If you go over this beautiful axis with the sarcophagus of Mahu, with the columns, there is an entrance through the temple to the space of another world. There is this apse, there is the temple, there is the white hall, and there are the mummies. Not only the mummies, but also in the centre, there is this amazing sarcophagus. It was taken from the permanent exhibition. In general, there are many things that are taken from the permanent exhibition, but the choice is probably logical. The sarcophagus is from the 10th and 9th century to the New Era, and it belonged to the great priestess singer Hermione of Karnak, whose name was Yusang. Unfortunately, very often, for some reason, even in the exhibition excursions, I hear something in the museum, I have never been able to tell the story of this object. I will spend a few minutes because it is amazing. First, let's look at it. Incredibly noble face, hands, massive wig, huge earrings that imitate open water nymphs, and the whole sarcophagus is covered with symbols, images, and there you can find, for example, the green sun. The sun is green, of course, because green is the colour of eternal life, and in symbolic art, the symbolic colour prevails over the real colour. Almost the entire cover is covered with images. I will not go into them now, otherwise we will stay here for several weeks. But all this, believe me, is about eternal life. Let's look at the face, the most perfect charm of the smile, and see what a luxury, how beautifully it's painted inside. And this huge figure in white is imitated. This is the embodiment of the West, the Western lady, the great mother of all the departed. On her head is a bread and a falcon. Around her are the spirits of another world. But look, in the hands of these spirits sometimes appears the angel, the symbol of life. And finally, a very interesting sign on which is imitated. This is the sign of a tiger from which drops of metal flow. This is gold. And what is gold? This is immortality. This is immortality. And she meets this priestess and the angel, because according to the legend, she meets all the dead. There are very interesting legends in the Egyptian texts about how Hathor imitated sometimes, taking the form of an earthly woman, and she walks among the living. And she asks questions and asks, do you remember your dead? And then she returns and tells, and sometimes comes up to her and asks, go to my people, ask how they are there, what do they have there, do they remember me, what will they say about me, good or bad? And then she comes, this is in the Egyptian text, tells what is there on earth for those who have become eternally alive. Well, again under this sign of gold, a little below, a huge ankh, a huge symbol of life, which should once again remind us about the real name of the sarcophagus, Ankh of the Lord of Life. Fives, Upper Egypt, the Ionian necropolis, the famous gorge, which is now called Deir el-Bahri. There was once a Coptic monastery, so it is called the Monastery of the North. In fact, the sacred atrium, natural atrium formed by rocks, the central giant structure. This is the Yixer Jezer, the most sacred of the sacred. This is the temple of the Queen Hatshepsut, or rather the Pharaoh and woman Hatshepsut, which very successfully ruled for 22 years in the 15th century BC. Then there are other temples, and around this whole space in the tombs, there is one wonderful fairy tale, not translated into Russian. Once a priest of the god Amon, who was a magician and a sorcerer, he had a question. What question does the fairy tale indicate? And no one could answer him. He says, listen, go to the Ionian necropolis, to the side of the river. From Karnak to the east, Ionian necropolis to the west. There is, in a certain place, there is one spirit you can call the spirit. He comes so well and tells everything very well. He took the advice, then he is on the roof of his own house in Karnak. He calls the spirit. The spirit comes from here, asks what is needed. The priest asks his question. The question, again, is not indicated in the fairy tale, some personal question. And before the spirit answered, and he answered, the priest says to him, listen, I am amazed. The meaning of the fairy tale is that you came with such a pleasant spirit and noble appearance. I will do everything for you well. We will bring sacrifice. We will commemorate your name. And then the spirit gets hysterical because everyone says so. I'm called, I'm asked, and then nothing. And then the priest of Amon Karnak and the spirit sit on the roof of the temple in Karnak. They are of human perfection. And then when everything is done, then the fragment of the fairy tale, unfortunately, is very strongly fragmented. He says that as a sign of the highest nobility, as a sign of the highest gratitude, the priest ordered to find the abandoned tomb from which this spirit came out, and he was reburied at the monastery of Cador, the great Western queen. This place is very, very sacred in antiquity, and the main sanctuary of the Hatshepsut temple is actually carved out from a natural cave, which was revered as the mother goddess. A large number of rituals were associated with this. In the middle of the 11th to 10th centuries, when the civil war began in Egypt between the north and the south, many priests of Amun Karnak could not order a full-fledged tomb. As a result, they were made luxurious sarcophagi on which they carried as much as possible what should accompany the deceased to the afterlife, but they were buried collectively. In 1891, this secret was called Bab el-Ghazuz, the Gate of the Priests. It was found by the locals, reported to the authorities, and here are the sketches of that time when European archaeologists and local assistants and more than 150 bodies were taken out from there in sarcophagi and placed in the objects of the burial inventory. That is, a giant collective tomb. By a miracle, George de Rossi, a well-known archaeologist who lived at that time, took such a photo, and among these tombs, somewhere our Usank, it was found right here. And when he went to Egypt, he did not know at all what to do with such an archaeological find, and he divided the whole find into several lots and presented the lots to friendly states. The sixth lot was received by Russia. In this lot was Usank, and in this lot was Nishita Ujataket, a fragment of the burial that is now kept in Voronezh, Kazan and Odessa. All over the world, in Norway, these sarcophagi lie everywhere. All the bodies were left in Egypt, so somewhere here, this famous find, let me remind you, was found in 1891, and the sarcophagus still lies with the mummy of the singer of the god Amon Usank. This is how the descent into this pit looks like now, and I will show you a very rare frame. This frame was made by one of my colleagues in the 1990s, later published. This is the dungeon where all these coffins lay. It is now closed for visit, and there you see fragments even of some, well, the ceiling collapsed, fragments of some objects. Here all these coffins lay against each other on the walls, among which was Usank, to whom we are now returning, next to her, with her amazing last abode, with this cocoon of eternity. There are different mummies, again displayed very decently. I will draw your attention to that mummy with a cut head. This is a late period, that is, it is somewhere between the 6th and 4th centuries BC, a small height, about 160 centimeters, will live from 40, judging by the teeth, judging by the state of the bones, from 40 to 50 years. And then, in the human body, it is preserved as a capsule of information about diseases, about fate. This is a tooth pulp. In the tooth pulp, everything is preserved that is associated with the disease. He has a colossal number of proteins that are characteristic for the DNA of the tooth pulp. That is, it is clear the cause of his death. Here, again, these wonderful studies, non-invasive, made by the Kurchatov Institute. Once again, I say that in the edition of the exhibition, you will see all the mummies. I have no such task. I have a task to tell about the fates of these people and those people who found them. Unfortunately, very often the head was cut to see. This is the story of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, when if you lived in a decent community in London, you could get a card with an invitation to a lunch. And at the end of the lunch, a solemn turning of the mummy brought from Egypt. Such was the entertainment. And of course, again in Cairo, when in the late 19th century royal mummies were found in the hiding places, again in Deir el-Bahri or in the valley of the Zar, then the mummies were cut up. Unfortunately, they are not exhibited at the exhibition in the Pushkin Museum. There are dried flowers of water lilies with the mummy of Ramses the Great, which Gaston Maspero, a renowned French archaeologist who cut up Ramses the Great, gave us a present. The story of embalming and eternal life cannot be without the story of Osiris. And when you turn your back to the mummies, their sarcophagus and moustache, you see such an amazing panorama of the figure of Osiris and the gods, his circle of magical objects. And below are the sawed-off mummies of the first millennium BC, when drawings and illustrations of the Book of the Dead were made on the sawed-off mummies. Let's take a look at some objects one by one. Of course, this is Osiris himself, such a bronze image of the 6th, 4th century BC. Not just a god of immortality, but also a god judge, before whom, according to the Book of the Dead, more verse 5, every soul reads a confession, a denial, which says what has not been done, and swears in his eternal purity. Osiris, who was killed by his brother Seth, the god of the desert, and who was the first to be reborn thanks to his wife Osiria and his sons, is not just a guarantee of immortality. He is the one to whom everyone turns. In the main temple complex of Osiris in the Upper Egyptian city of Abydos, once a year in November, there was a secret ritual which was called Shetau, a mystery. That is what the Greeks called the word of mystery, which spoke of the rebirth of Osiris. The difference between the mystery of Abydos from, for example, the mystery of Demeter in Eleusinos, or from other sacred places, was that a person could come there and just put a stone in the desert with the name of his beloved father or beloved mother or whoever he lost. The one who is mentioned in Abydos will be assigned to the ears of the great god. The one who is mentioned in Abydos will forever go through the rebirth with Osiris together. And this is such an incredible possibility of connection with another world. Therefore, there are many figures of Osiris. He is in his crown of parades, with the sceptres of power, with very ancient sceptres, which are from the deep antiquity, from the 3rd millennium, maybe from the 4th, comes the Egyptian culture. But there would be no greatness of Osiris which gives immortality to everyone, if not for his wife Isis. There are many images of Isis at the exhibition. This one is very beautiful, silhouetted. She sits in her traditional dress, the horns of the cow, the sun disk, and the baby, her son, the choir in her arms. On the one hand, the great goddess, the great charm, possessing all the supernatural magic, knowing the secret name of the eternal God. And on the other hand, the only goddess who went the way of a simple woman, who was a widow, who wandered, who was looking for a husband, who beat for him, who, uttering all the incredible spells, revived him for a few moments, and for these moments conceived his own heir, who did everything later for Osiris to be reborn. At the same time, the connection of these goddesses with the Assyrian cult is very interesting, because in the centre of the showcase, such a box for the insides, in the late time of the same Ptolemy, look at the side wall. Grey-black pillars with crossbars, jade, eternity, invulnerability, the support of the sky, the symbols of Osiris, the fabric tied with a knot, necessarily with a red tint, jade, the symbol of Isis, the symbol of her blood, the symbol of her huge long belt, impregnated with the blood of her victim, with the help of which she carried a sarcophagus through the desert of Necropolis. He and she, invulnerability and protection, and together such signs are read as Shitau, the mystery of transformation. And if at the same time we look at the front side of the box, we will return to it. There, again, Isis and Nephthys, Jed and Thet. In the exhibition, Jed on the left, Thet. Pay attention to the face of the goddess, a very beautiful image, faience blue jade, Thet made of blue faience and red glass in the centre, two more jades and two eyes of Hora at the top. Hora will grow up, he will fight Seth, the murderer of his father, he will defeat him. At the time of the battle, Seth tears out the eye of Hora, and when the mummy of Osiris, already made and prepared, but he cannot overcome this terrible barrier of death, Hora lets him swallow his own pulsating eye, part of himself, torn from the body. And this victim is so full of life and so great that after that Osiris begins to be reborn and overcomes death. That is why the eye of Hora, holistic eye, is a symbol of the highest victim, immortality, an incredible gift which Hora gave to Osiris, his own father. Here is the wall which I was talking about. Maybe the image is not high art, it's already such a degrading Egyptian tradition. Look how interesting. On the right, Isis, her symbol of the throne on the head. On the left, Nephthys, her characteristic symbol also on the head. They take such vessels, they're called cytula, vessels for water or for sacred milk, and they water this thing that is on the victim. The grain is taken, the sand and the earth are taken, the victim is covered, or even an imitation of the body of Osiris is made, and it is watered with sacred water, because the earth and the dry is the male beginning, water and all the wet is the female beginning. And when the male and the female beginnings are combined, it turns out a new life. The sprout comes off. They water the ascensions to solemnly symbolize the immortality of Osiris and his rebirth. A few more interesting monuments from this part of the exhibition, which is associated with the satirical ritual. According to the legend, when Isis found the body of Osiris in Phoenicia in the Bible, she took him back to Egypt. At some point he died, and with horror, the body of his brother is found in Seth. It cuts into many fragments. The number of fragments varies in different texts, from 14 to 64, and scatters all over Egypt. So Isis begins, together with Horus and Anubis, to look for these parts of the body, and at the place of finding each part of the body establishes a religious sacred centre. On the left is an image of the head of Osiris in reliquary. This is a symbol of the city of Abydos, the capital of the city. And here are two spirits with the heads of jackals, symbols of the West. They keep the great shrine. And again she keeps Osiris. She sits on her knees, and tiny Osiris, in the form of a human figure, is on her knees. And there on her crown, Modius, which is at the top. If the statuette had been completely preserved, there would have been an image of a scorpion possessing mysterious powers. Isis the Hygidit, the great scorpion, she is the one who deals with healing, magic, gives victory over evil, the one that gives breath, breathes the throat. We also know this goddess as Selket or Serket, as one of the great guardians of the deceased during his burial. Different images of Isis and Horus, and let's look at Horus too. Here is such a wonderful phallic amulet. Isis goes from left to right, and between them Horus Pakiredu. Horus, he is a baby, the son of Osiris and Isis, the slogan of youth, a sign that he is very young, a naked baby. Look how they hold him in their arms. This is their hope. This is the child of the coming day. This is the new sun. Osiris is yesterday. Horus is tomorrow. This is the message of the coming day, which should provide life to everyone who needs it. One of the most beautiful images of Isis, which is in the museum collection, is Isis, which is hidden in the swamps of the Delta, in the swamps of the Arctic. According to the texts, she created a nest there, and in this nest, she is like a golden female falcon. She nannies her baby, hiding it from all evil. And her guards, spirits with knives, go here to protect her from the servants of Seth or from the forces of chaos. And look at what luxurious snake protectors also rise here above the papyrus stables in order to protect the goddess. Isis is the key to the resurrection of Osiris, and Isis is one of perhaps the most significant goddess for Egypt at the end of its existence, already in that era when Egypt begins to merge with the Greek-Roman world. Her temple on the island of Philae in the south of the Colosseum is the last temple of the Egyptian tradition that existed until the 4th century AD. O Isis, great mother of God, Lady Philae, divine wife, reverent wife, mother of God, great wife, royal jewel, lady of beauty, palace. It's about eating the heart. To imagine it in a better way, by the way, in the extreme right corner is our unfortunate deceased who's being judged by this figurine. I will show you at the same time a magnificent fragment from the Turin Museum of Osiris' trial, a fragment of a very high quality book of the dead. You have practically recognized all of them, and the gods of the divine trial of the heavenly Jajat and the scales, and here is Anubis and Horse, and that one, and the monster Ammit, the devourer, and Osiris himself on the throne, and here in the extreme right lower corner, the deceased, in front of whom is the goddess of truth, Maat. We move on, and here in the side niches there are very interesting figures. This is Patasakra Osiris. This is the guardian of all the deceased. Look at his blushed cheeks. He is absolutely cartoonish here, in my opinion. Such figures were simply placed as a cover for the tomb, or in some cases they were hollow, and they were used as a case for the scrolls of the Book of the Dead. Such wonderful Sakra Osiris are here. And again, one of the famous pylons of the museum, which has recently been restored, a titanic work, including the employees of the restoration laboratory of the state museums of the Kremlin, Anubis, Osiris, everything is clear. And in the center, the mother with the baby. And this is the child she is carrying. First of all, look at the complete violation of the canon. This is a classic painting, and look at the sadness in this. Well, apparently they wouldn't have written it just like that. Either she died during childbirth, that is, somehow her end was associated with this baby. In general, they went to another world together, and she is confused. But at the same time, the gaze that looks at eternity. Anubis already passes her to Osiris, and look how alive, bowing her head, the baby looks at this world, saying goodbye to him forever. Very touching things. She suffered a lot back in ancient times. In those years when I worked in the museum, we also dreamed about it. It hung on our wall in the department of Vostok, and we, the employees, dreamed that she would be restored. a few years ago. Well done. It was made of titanium wire. It was shifted to a different base. And now this is a unique veil. Nowhere else is there such a veil with a baby. It is exhibited in the exhibition. We are turning around the hall and look at the sarcophagi standing here. And by the way, how lucky. This colour of dull gold, which literally haunts us throughout the exhibition, is not just the colour of noble metal, not just immortality. This is the colour of another world. This is another world. This is the very Duat from which this colour comes. And here are these beautiful sarcophagi. I'll go through them very quickly, because this is exactly what specialists from the Kurchatov Institute, an extremely sarcophagus with an unsaved face. Very rough work. The girl lived in the province, and in general, there were no decent masters there. They tried as hard as they could. The boundary of Greco-Roman time was included in the collection of the Pushkin Museum from the Neurological Institute. No one knows how she got there. By the way, you know, I just remember when I myself worked with the inventors of the museum. We, for example, got a lot of things from the Lenin Library. It's very simple to explain. When the nationalisation of property took place, books were just scattered in a bag, and everything that stood on the shelves. There were Egyptian bronze gods, all kinds of wooden images, whatever there was. A lot came from the RKB then. So let's go back to Our Lady. Her height was 100 The Egyptians were short, 35 years old. This is the only mummy in the Pushkin Museum that's kept in Nubia. The African Negroid features. So it was Nubia who lived somewhere in Greco-Roman time in the north of Egypt, judging by the style of the sarcophagus. We'll look at it like this. It was never exhibited, so there are a lot of things that were known only to the staff. The next sarcophagus with such a noble, though damaged, face. The sarcophagus is from the 7th, 6th century BC, and the mummy is from Ptolemy the 3rd Sekun. So they used a sarcophagus from a more ancient burial. Most likely it was ruined. It was expensive to make a sarcophagus. Unfortunately, the part of the inscription where the deceased's name would be mentioned after the prayer is male, but it's an old woman inside. She is about 100 tall, and it's very interesting that she has red tissue on her face. Not so long ago, research was published, and new papyruses for balsam were found in Copenhagen and Louvre. And there, as far as it was possible to describe, there is a ritual that is built. Every 4 days, there is a balsam, that is, soda and salt are changed to tron, which was sprinkled on the body. Every 4 days, there is a certain prayer text. Every 4 days, the red linen cloth, soaked with tron, is changed. So there are some interesting findings of Kurchatovsky which confirm the material that we know about papyruses. I'll show you her face. It's not exhibited in the exhibition either. It's a thing from the funds. Here is such a wonderful person. The sarcophagus is male. The mummy is female inside. The late period of the 7th, 6th centuries before the new era, older than 50 years. This is such a modern age for ancient Egypt. The height is about 160 centimetres. Once again, in the book published for the exhibition, there are photos of all the mummies. I just didn't want to reshoot them. You can look at the inhabitants of these sarcophagi and see what a very beautiful goddess of nudes, spread wings on her chest, a solar disc on her head, the spirits of the guardian, that is, everything that is necessary in the other world. This wonderful sarcophagus was bought by Morozov in 1894 in Egypt, the man of the end of the New Kingdom, that is, somewhere around the 11th century before the new era, grew 165 centimetres at the age of 35-40. Morozov bought it and put it in the Egyptian hall of his mansion, a grand mansion on the Smolensk Boulevard. Not far from here, next to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, there is a grandiose Egyptian hall with Egyptian columns, painted sphinxes, and so on. You can find the picture on Google, and there he had this sarcophagus of the mummy. And once, as Konstantin Korovin writes in his memoirs, people were sitting and drinking, and someone says to him, "It's not good for you here, it's not orthodox, you are a dead man, and he is standing here." And they decided to bury him. They took him out and began to think how to bury him according to the ancient Egyptian rite. No one knows the rite. Someone called out and decided to bury him in an orthodox way. They buried him. He spent a little less than a year in the garden of the mansion. Then they realized that it was not good. They dug him out and gave him to the Rumyantsev Museum. And then, after a few compositions through the Museum of the Classical East, he went to the Pushkin Museum. The mummy was in very poor condition, rotten and dusty. He lay in the harsh Russian soil, buried according to the Orthodox custom. If only he knew in his life, at the end of the new kingdom, what an amazing fate would happen to him. Here is a story related to the inhabitant of this sarcophagus. And finally, the last one, very beautiful, written in the name of the nobleman Korka. The mummy is also very well preserved in this sarcophagus, but I'll tell you about it a little later, because there is a certain moment that will allow you to stop in a special way at the inhabitant or the inhabitantess of this sarcophagus. A very beautiful exposition. You can go watch, study, look and think. The last sarcophagus in this part of the exhibition is very beautiful. This is somewhere around the boundary of the 4th and 3rd century BC. This is a circumfaction of the Kers type that has its form and ascends to the form of the sanctuary of the Lower Egypt of such an ancient. Now look, we begin to disassemble symbols. You are now starting to read. Look at the phrase Jad and Thet. Jad and Thet, Seshet, the test of transformation. Below again, Jad and Thet, false doors, the gates of another world. And here is a huge sunbed. In the centre of the sunbed in Nausicaa is the sun god himself, Sphinx Tutu, which on the nose must incinerate, in his view, all the enemies of the sun god. The gods with the heads of jackals or Ba'u Imanet, the souls of the west, drag this sunbed to the sunrise. 4 pavians of the sunrise raise their paws in the pose of prayer, a sign that the sun will rise here. And again, the symbols of the sides of the horizon, on the left, the west, and on the right, the east, are indicated on the edges of the lid of this wonderful sarcophagus, which belonged to the nobleman whose name was Horunefer. In this prayer, everything is signed here. Who is whose son? All the necessary details are here. We leave the White Hall, and in front of us opens the parade colonnade. There are 2 sides of things that can be in the tombs, and in the back, in the front, or rather in the back, we have left the moss and the golden Nile, an amazing silhouette of the entrance to the Egyptian tomb, because then we have a transition through the 2 main components of the Egyptian tomb, modelled very well. Tomb as an earthly sanctuary where the dead are commemorated, which is open to everyone, and the tomb as an underground structure where the mummy lies. We will now go through the gallery and see it all. This is what the blocks look like. They are made in such an interesting bunch of chambers according to some thematic principles. To be honest, the thematic principle is very conditionally observed, but the things are beautiful. I'm interested in another thing. This frieze, which is made with complex doors on top, it kind of unites them in this space of another world. Let's see what is here. The first showcase, a sarcophagus of the Middle Kingdom era and 2 boats on top. After all, if a person died and it so happened that he did not have time to visit Obidos, did not have time to say goodbye, did not have time to participate in the mysteries of another world, what to do? Then he takes a boat, throws it into the waters of another world, and the sacred city of Obidos floats on it. These 2 boats are very beautiful. The first one on the right is a monument bought by Yuri Stepanovich Nechayev Maltsov, the chief patron of the museum. Think about it. 2/3 of the accounts for the entire construction of the museum were spent on the money of this man. Only in recent years people began to remember about him. Until the Soviet era, it was not customary to talk about him, which in general is a shame. Now, portraits and names sound decent, and Yuri Stepanovich Nechayev Maltsov, having built a museum, he also bought special things for the museum. This is one of the early monuments bought before the Galinishchav collection arrived at the museum. The second boat is more interesting. We will see it now. It is unique. It has a nose and a pocket with the heads of ibises. These are the symbols of the desert. This is a burial boat, and at the same time it is a wonder of Obidos. Many years ago when I worked there, I kept it in my hands. The nose is removed, it just stands there. And there are 2 figures. Here you can see the knees of one figure inside in the aisle. There is one, the one who is already in another world, embalmed, sitting on the throne. And the second apparently is a priest or someone who leads a funeral ritual. He is alive and he sits diagonally on the other side inside this cabin. That is, this boat actually has an inhabitant and the one to whom it belongs, and now it is in eternal wandering and sailing to the city of Obidos. The next showcase is a mask that has never been exhibited, one of 2, a magnificent mask of the sarcophagus of the 4th century BC. I will show it now in a large way. Pots, vessels for the interiors. I will stop a little more in detail later. A magnificent priest's head, somewhere around the 5th, 4th centuries BC, on the top left. It was in the old exhibition until 2012 in the new exhibition. Unfortunately, the girls did not take it. It is a pity because the thing is absolutely wonderful. Look at the work on the street of the sarcophagus. Look at the sadness. What a nobility. What a portrait. How these eyes looking at you are made. Unfortunately, due to the fact that Golenishtchev bought it already in this state. That is, he was sold pieces of lids. There is no name, nothing. Only in style you can say the date. The next showcase is a family. It is beauty. It is jewellery and all sorts of family stories. Well, on the side, immediately a wonderful story when made such as trays, and you can see subtle, graceful things. Well, first of all, at the very top with cow ears, a fragment of a sister. This is the goddess Kador. This is the goddess of love, the goddess of femininity, the goddess of beauty. This is all about Nefru. Nefru is beauty. Nefer is beautiful. Nefer is one of the defining core terms of the Egyptian civilization. Well, everything that is necessary to maintain Nefru, there is a place to be. Look at the mirrors, the lower mirror of the permanent exposition, the flower of water lily, from which the mask of Bes is taken, because he keeps the beauty from the scourge and evil. Here are the combs, here are the hairpins, here's the far right part of the chestnut priestess and ivory in the form of such hands. Here are the incrustations from the walls of the palaces of the Amarna era, 14th century BC. Such amazing papyruses, and Kador as the great ruler of beauty, on the side of a famous couple from the collection of the Museum Nyai in Asida, a couple of the 13th century BC sculptural group. Apparently, this is not his wife, but still his mother, because there is a tomb in Ivansky necropolis, where most likely this thing happens. His wife has a completely different name there. They went to another world. This is not just a statue. This is a statue for worship, for offering sacrifices, for commemoration. First, look how they hold each other incredibly, just intertwined with their hands. And then between them, between their heads, there is Neshmet. Neshmet is the lake of Osiris. That is, this is already a sign that they are in another world. If we could see this thing from behind, as it was in the old exhibition until 2012, there's a huge prayer for immortality, and all the hieroglyphs are filled with green pigment, because green is the colour of eternal life. These are such wonderful female figures. Moreover, a woman with a baby in her arms. She is ancient, the Middle Kingdom. And this is the 20th to 19th century BC, and a divine Nalozhnitsa, which was put in the tomb so that the ideal of beauty was together with the deceased and his posthumous state. This is the 13th century BC. The next item is completely unique. I pay attention to it in every way. This is a ceramic vessel for milk, breast milk of a woman who has not given birth to a son. It is depicted here as the earthly form of the goddess Isis, because when a woman gives birth to a son, she accepts herself as a goddess. She becomes Isis in a moment. Medicines were mixed on her breast milk. Embankments were made on it. And this is a very rare thing of the 15th century BC. Unfortunately, only the head of the infant is lost. This is a very rare thing that a museum should be proud of, but which does not stand in constant exposure. For the first time, finally, people can see it. A unique, perfect image. See how touching it is. What a handle, what a hairstyle, how she looks, how carefully her baby is held by her breast. This is an amazing thing. An absolute masterpiece of the collection. Fortunately, at least at the exhibition, you can look at it. Next, we go with you and see here not only the whispers of the servant for the soul of the dead, for the huge world at the top, but also a monument to the Greek-Roman time, when this incredible flow of cultures fell into the Nile Valley. In the centre is a massive Aphrodite Kadkor, and on the side are the various forms of the mother goddess and some other things, which I will now show you in detail. See what an image. It has never been exhibited either. This is Isida Thermutis. This is Isida, the great snake, the goddess of fate, revered in the Aeolian oasis. A very rare image. She was the ruler of the sacred snakes, and also the patroness of harvest, grain. And she, like Hecate, the Greek Hecate, patroness of witchcraft, has a torch in her hand, because in the dead of night she patronizes her enemies. Nearby is a wonderful lamp in the form of the god Bes, an Egyptian smoke guard, protector. Here he shows the tongue of all evil, because he defeats him. From the sides you can see the windows were inserted here, and such a Bes was a lamp in some Greek-Roman house in Egypt. Another Bes with a sword, and a wonderful dog. This dog was associated in Greco-Roman times with the cult of Isida, because according to the legend in the heat, Isida returns to Egypt after she cried for Osiris, and from the only tear the Nile starts to flow. This is the end of July, and according to the legend she flies on a dog, on the constellation of a big dog, and this heat in Egypt was called Dogs, Canicula. This is a canicular dog with which holidays began, and the collection of grapes, that is, grapes, wine, the Nile flowed, happiness for all of Egypt. Canicular dog, absolutely beautiful, it is here. Even in two examples, there is also a small table with decorations. In the centre, there are heart scorpions. That is, these are the scorpions which lay on the heart, on the chest area, on the heart of the mummy, and on them is the 30th chapter of the Book of the Dead about the heart of my mother, which calls the heart not to testify to the judge Osiris against this deceased. The most various symbols here, I will not dwell on all of them. I will show a rare one. This is Iadet. She lies here in a green showcase. I showed her large, a cobra with a lion's head, a symbol of the wrath of the mother goddess, and at the same time a symbol of fate. It is Iadet that gives birth to what people sow. People prepare the soil according to the Egyptian concept. Then comes their wrathful lion's head of the mother goddess and sows the red seeds of wrath. Only where the soil is prepared by people, they rise. Epidemics come, epizootics, and war, which is sown by people. In the temples there were special rituals, pacification, Iadet, twice a day, so that it would not appear in its full form, so that it would not come as the wrath of the mother goddess, but as an upbringing which should teach people. There are these images in a few collections, so I highlight it especially. What's next here? Here's the red glass, and this glass, and faience, and stone, red sphinx, magnificent sets of beads, a lot of things. I will not dwell on individual objects just for a very long time. Otherwise, another fragment of the exhibition. Here are these vessels which are at the top. They are from the tomb of Maha, many of which we remember by the sarcophagus. They are false, that is, they are just made of wood. Painted under granite, alabaster, basalt. It does not matter whether there's water or not. The main thing is that there is a vessel as a symbol of water, as a symbol of drinking. Well, and here are various sacrificial offerings. Here, such small clay dishes were brought to necropolis. Not everyone had a magnificent sacrifice. A cow was made of bread. A goose was made of bread. Here, peasants, at least something. But from the point of view of the world, this is a full-fledged sacrifice. If a person did not lie, if there's no goose, and there are no legs of a bull, in fact. In the centre of this table, there are metal cutters for papyrus, a model of tools, agricultural models, a lotus flower as a symbol of rebirth, a lotus and a water nymph, a dagger. And here are two bronze things in the centre. This is an image of the sacrifices in which the priests make an offering. You come to the tomb, put such a sacrifice, make an offering. Then it starts with the help of a magic ritual. It begins to make an offering to the deceased forever. That is, this is the eternal function of sacrifice. That is, such wonderful magical objects. Let's go further. This is the part that speaks of beauty. Look at what a luxurious Greek Roman statue of a woman in the centre. It's just a shame that it doesn't stand in constant exposure. This is certainly a masterpiece of its time, granite. And the beauty is different. A cat and a falcon on top. A falcon is a symbol of male beauty. A cat is a symbol of female beauty. Bronze things of the first millennium BC. The beauty of Nefer is generally all well-being. Therefore, on the one hand, it is the beauty of the body, the perfection of the appearance. And I will remind you that in the ancient world, the Egyptian woman was considered the most beautiful woman in the entire ancient world. This is a traditional canon. And on the other hand, this is knowledge, because to be beautiful is also to be smart, for an ancient Egyptian. Therefore, here I will show you now there is a small figure of a singer. However, let me show you in the following frames. Look at the proportions. Very thin, very long, elongated body. These are typical proportions of Greek-Roman times. By the way, on the right at the top, a cube-shaped statue, a statue of a nobleman who sits hugging his knees, and on such a statue, usually placed a piece of biography, some name, was placed in the temple. Isek, a piece of grain, from the 15th century to the new era. This is a very important point, that in Egypt the consonant image is adjacent to the text. If you know how to read, then you can bring the victim, or you can just read the name and read the prayer about this person, and he will give up, and then when you get there, he will meet, remember, and stand before the face of the great God and say that this is a good person. He remembered me. To remember this memory, it is absolutely incredible for ancient Egypt. Therefore, we know so many events and details of personal life. Well, this is a wonderful piece from the end of the Middle Ages. This is the best piece from the Pushkin Museum. Very good turn scroll, and this is never knowledge, never mind, and it is never beauty, never of such incredible grace. And this is also beauty. Beauty is a very big concept in ancient Egypt, which is not reduced only to the beauty of the physical body, not only to aesthetics. Well, everything related to beauty, ladies and children. Look, because glass vessels from Phoenicia, alabaster from Travertine, black, such vertical solar tubes here in the left part of the picture. There, in my opinion, if I remember correctly, yes, 6, the look will not change. Here, this vessel, this is coal. This is a vessel where black paint was filled. It was called in ancient Egypt mesjumet. It was made on the basis of galanite, this black eyeliner of the eyes, a la Cleopatra. It is made exactly to coal. By the way, it's very curious, men and women were painted in Egypt, because in the basis of paint there are also herbal extracts. Ophthalmology was in demand. In Egypt, the desert, hot, there were many eye diseases, but there's still one point. When you come today to the Egyptian village, modern, you will be surprised. You'll see small children, 3-4 years old, who run down the street with painted black eyes. This is a means from the eyes. Mesjumet allows the eyes to overcome a bad look directed at you. And this tradition through all the millennia came to modern Islamic Egypt. Below the spoon, well, yes, the famous spoon with water lilies, it remained in the main exposition. But here there are wonderful ducks, fragments of spoons, or, for example, in the left part, a very beautiful spoon in the form of a symbol of eternal life, Ankh, which holds in his hands 2 oases. These are symbols of power, and above them, the capacity for painting itself. This is a solar disk. Here, about this subject I'm talking about now, here the Ankh may not be so clearly visible, but this is all related to cosmetics. This must be examined. Egyptian cosmetics was the best in the whole ancient world, the most difficult. We know a lot of recipes, they were very complex. The best perfumes, by the way, were also bought in Rome from Egypt. Moving on, here is a showcase with the priesthood and the gods, and here is such an interesting sculptural portrait. It is not usually exhibited in the museum. This person was called Amasis. He ruled in the era of the so-called Scythian Renaissance. The city of Scythia was the capital of Egypt at that time. Amasis, the king, who was sometimes called James II, while the Greek king, the Greek version, is Egyptian. He was the most famous ruler of this era. This is the second half of the first millennium of this era. He has a suspension with the name of his king, Khnumibra Mereneid. Khnumibra is the favourite goddess of Mereneid. There's a pillar at the back, and on this pillar there's the name of the title. He was very interesting. He was the one who does not sleep on the guard of the king's rooms. This is the head of the guard, the royal lodging, and there is his name. There is the beginning of his title, and think now, this is the upper part in Moscow, the lower part of the statue in Cairo, the sarcophagus in Leiden, several large monuments with his name in the Alexandrian Archaeological Museum, and at least 3 more monuments I know in Louvre and in Copenhagen. This is to the question about the separate art. This is exactly the museum work, to collect all these stories together. Many years, the outstanding Russian Egyptologist Oleg Dmitrievich Berleyev, who published these monuments and who found such incredible connections between various works stored in different museums of the world. Well, and with the gods here in excess, you can see separately from left to right the bird, the great patron of art and crafts, Mr. Memphis, ahead of 2 cats, an anthropomorphic figure of Bastard, the dance of the goddess, the dance of fun and femininity, a very unusual image on the top of the banner of Isida Kedidet, or Selket, a scorpion with a human head. Further, there are inscriptions. Well, you need to look around, and the only problem here is that the light is bad. It's dark there on these lower rows. It's hard to look around the bronze sculpture, but it's amazing and it's worth your attention. And finally, we came to that structure of the tomb, the first part, which is a chapel if you want, where anyone could come, where you can consider the history on these reliefs. Commemorate this person. There will be all his life and his worries and his dream about the afterlife. And here this story is modelled from 2 sides, 2 slabs from the 3rd millennium to the new era, with 2 nobles who open the passage inside this space. In this space, there are reliefs that are rightly considered the masterpieces of the collection. Saqqara, the 14th to the 13th centuries to the new era, with the burial process. You see the sarcophagus that is pulled on the slings, and here on the slings on the sand or water with oil, because you can't go through the desert on wheels. They carry, look, ashes, furniture, various vessels, and friends go. And it is written there, the soldiers, that is, this is the tomb of some military leader. There's an assumption, not established exactly. These are friends in parade clothes who see off their comrade on his way to eternal life. I repeat, the 14th and 13th centuries to the new era. Well, of course, the famous masterpiece of the Pushkin Museum, the famous stela with the weepers. Weepers are men in military mourning clothes. The thing happens from the tomb of Khorram Kheba, the famous military leader of the period Tutankhamun, which later will become the pharaoh himself. The continuation of this relief is stored in Detroit, in the tomb itself, which is in Saqqara, huge pieces of walls, empty, something in Bologna, something in Leiden, something in the Hermitage, something here. In the 19th century, the tomb, in fact, was practically cut up, and its separate monuments, respectively, fell into different museum collections. Against the background of this concept, a huge concept of immortality, there were people, and we know it. How many witnesses, how many correspondents, how much love, how much resentment, and how much doubt. And this doubt is unexpected for ancient Egypt. Papyrus Harith 500. The bodies disappear and come. Others replace them since the time of the ancestors. The gods of the past will calm down in their pyramids, equal to the immunity, and the spirits are buried in their tombs. From the builders of the houses, there is not even a place left. I heard the words of the wise men in Makatepa and Jadev Kor, from the speech of which everyone has on their lips. And what about the tombs? Their walls are destroyed. These places, as if they did not exist, they did not exist. No one comes from them to tell about them, to tell about their existence, to strengthen our hearts until you get closer to the place where they went. Be kind-hearted to make your heart forget about it. Let it be for you the best to follow your heart while you're alive. Put your peace on your head, and the deed on you will be of weight. Enrich yourself with the wonderful true ointments of the gods. Be cheerful. Do not let your heart panic, following its attraction to your good. Do your business on earth according to the commandment of your heart, and do not crumble until the day of worship will come for you yourself. Do not listen to the one whose heart does not beat. Complain, and tears do not save anyone from the tomb. So celebrate, do not grieve, for you cannot take your wealth with you, and no one from the departed has yet returned. This is a part of the famous song of the harpist. It is always depicted before the harpist, the blind harpist who plays the harp and sings it. And there is this fragment of the song of the harpist, and there's even, I will not read it, it's just a lot of time, there is an answer. And after a while this discourse appeared, and they said, what is there in ancient texts that do not respect the memory of the tomb of the world? And there is such a text to this harpist. Yes, how dare you not to believe? And on the other hand, this is the first doubt of the human as it sounded in the second millennium before the new era, written by someone who saw these incredible ceremonies of forgiveness of sins. Look at the hands raised to the sky, pressed to the face, people who fell to the abyss, people who address something to the sun god or someone from the world of gods. The entire tomb is made in this style. It can be visited. There's still a lot of Saqqara. These are fantastic monuments of the epic of Tutankhamun in the Memphis necropolis. Next to it is another way to communicate with another world. Look on the stele of this epoch of the ancient world, on the stele somewhere in the 6th dynasty. There are victims. We have already understood about sacrifice. I talk about it a lot, but you can write a letter to the world of the dead, and in fact exactly such a letter on this pot, which was called a bowl in the label. In general, I was touched by this bowl. You come to the necropolis, write a letter to a dear person who is left. You bring some influence. Well, there is water, beer, milk, anything, wine, and such letters exist. In the Gemini meeting, this is the only example. And in the Louvre, for example, there is a letter to a mother whose first son died very early. She then got married again. In Egypt, often a woman could get married further. There was no such tough status that would keep her in one marriage. And she had children. She was happy. And one of the kids got sick. She went to the necropolis, wrote a letter to her first son. She said, you left first. You left very young. You are a pure soul, definitely. You are definitely from the throne of Osiris. I will bring you all the offerings, influence, and cure your brother who is now sick. Come from this world to that world. If you come and receive this letter, dream. If you dream to me, then I will understand that my letter came to you. There are a lot of such letters. They did not perceive the world of those who left as a distant world. It is close. And first of all, it is close to us. in the colossal space of sleep. The space of sleep in ancient Egypt is a huge topic. For those who are interested, there is a free access to my big lecture on this topic on YouTube. Dreams, nightmares, anything in Egypt, of course, was. So this is the way of communication. Well, there's also a wonderful fragment of the painting in the form of a man in a long hairstyle holding a pen in the form of a prayer in the pose of a prayer of adoration. This is the 15th, 14th century before the new era. When the mummy is preparing for the burial, it is already in the cover or in the sarcophagus and stands vertically, as you saw in the White Hall, and there is a famous ceremony of opening the lips and eyes. 75 elements in the ceremony. Each element is associated with one of 75 forms of the sun god. The general meaning is that magically, as it were, other eyes, lips and nostrils, and a new cycle of life in this mummy, so that further a person can follow his destiny for the burial world. Aromas, oils, and the bloodied leg of a bull were used because it is the magic of blood. Blood should start this impulse going there. And here in this showcase on top, there is a central box for a whisper for the statues of the answerers. And there on one side on the left is depicted a mummy of a man whose name was Khonsu. And this man was a famous artist who is fond of Egyptian art. This is the son of Sennacherib, one of the most famous Egyptian artists of the era of the Ramesses. And in front of him, his son is making his amoeba from a red vessel, whose name was Bakinamun. Here he becomes the one who performs this ritual for his father, next to him, of Sitila. Do you remember Sitila I told you about when Isida and Neftida were watering the stairs? Sitila and the crying goddess. And here is a very beautiful Isida in a crying pose. Such things were always paired. There were Isida and Neftida, but the most interesting is in front of her. Let's first take a close look. Here is Isida herself, one hand at the knee, another hand which has not been preserved. It would have been brought to the forehead. This is a gesture of crying, her symbol of the throne on the head. And here is what I want to show you. These are very rare things. This is a palette made of travertine with a mention of the 7 sacred oils of the god Nefertum, the god of vegetation, which were used when balsamizing and used in worship. Here the oil is festive. The best oil is from Libya. The best oil is Nechem, such brotherly oil if you try to translate the term. The best oil is cedar. These 7 sacred oils, and what lies below it is called Urhiku, great charm. This is a gazer which was used by the most important elements of the ritual of opening the mouth and eyes. I'll show you an example from the British Museum. This is a famous fragment of the Book of the Dead Papyrus of Hunefer. Here you see the tomb. There is a mummy. It is held by Anubis. The widows cry here. And look at one of the priests, which is literally stretched to the bushes of the mummy. This is a stick with the head of Oven. In Egypt, Oven, Ba sounded approximately the same as Ba, which we translate as soul. Therefore, Oven is a symbolic image associated with everything that depicts the soul of the eternal God. Sometimes even a huge flying neck of the soul of the eternal God is depicted with such a head. And below, look, there is a cow with a calf as a sacrifice, and such a table with a lot of magic objects. And there in the centre there is also Ur-He-Cow, only it is here so black, also with a sheep's head. Here it is in the centre, if you noticed. And there are many other different objects, a unique monument. It, unfortunately, is not exhibited in the exhibition until 2012. In the old exhibition it was. It was always very interesting to show, because this is what starts in the mummy eternal life. And here's another relief. We are already with you in the outer part of the tomb. It is also the turn of the 14th and 13th centuries to the new era. On top, on a boat, on a sleigh, they carry a mummy. Then they carry all that is necessary for the burial, and a very beautiful scene below, just weeping. The mummy is vertical, it is held by the hands. Here is a priest in the mask of Anubis, and we have the inscription says that this is a person who took the position of the chief manager cattle then in the temple of Ammon, and they called him Eu. Here is the name, and here are the victims. And again, by the way, on the table between the priest Ur-Hekau, you see her again. The first priest in his hands holds a turned scroll. This is one of the priests who is a priest who reads the righteousness of this ritual. This is Hairy Heb, the one who is over the scroll, unlike Hairy Sachet, who's with the mask of Anubis, who is associated with the blizzard. And here too, incantation, offering, this magic ceremony of opening the mouth and eyes, which was held not only in relation to the dead, but to any work of art which they considered alive from the point of view of space. All the statues that you see, they all went through the ceremony of opening the mouth and eyes. And in the ancient Egyptian language, the verb mes is to give birth. When a woman gives birth to a child, and this is a sculptor who makes a statue. This is also giving birth, only from the point of view of another world. It is similar, in fact, action. There is a huge number in all this sense, only superficial, of which I can tell you today already in time. You enter inside the tomb, and here are several amazing monuments. I want to tell you in several examples. Well, inside the tomb there is not only reliefs, but also statues, because this is a place of commemoration of the deceased. And you know the Egyptian tombs, well, yes, here is a model, but if you have been or are visiting, it is a completely different feeling of time, because it flows in a different way there, because there on the walls is the story of another person. This is not sorcery, it's just a completely different world. Carter about time in the tomb of Tutankhamun. For a moment, the idea of time as a factor of human life loses all meaning. 3 or maybe 4,000 years have passed since the human leg the last time stepped on the floor on which we stood. But still everything around resembled just frozen life. Half filled the drawer at the door itself, burned lamp, fingerprints on fresh paint, funerary wreath on the doorstep. It seemed all this could be yesterday. The very air preserved here for decades was the same air in which those breathed who brought to the mummy to the place of her last inspiration. Time has disappeared. Time disappears not only due to the atmosphere, but due to the fact that we can read. Here, such a wonderful sculptural group stands in such a niche. The fact is that in the tombs, especially in the tombs of the 3rd millennium up to the new era, there was such a place which was called Sertab, literally the cellar. This is an Arabic word. There was a separate chamber. A statue was placed there, a statue that depicted not just the deceased himself, but to his life force. There was a slot or a hole, and in front of this place there was a victim. And through the statue, the deceased received these sacrifices one way, and on the other, please, side, a false door. This is a door which is inscribed by the names and titles of a particular person. And this is in fact the door in which the vault is raised, rolled up, and from there he comes out and he is mentioned on this side. And since he is mentioned on this side, he can come out from there and he can accept his offering. For a minute, let's stop on this wonderful sculptural group. It was called Unio. He was the head of the gardeners of the great house. This is the main gardener of the royal palace. His wife wears the title of the Queen. She was a friend of the king. That is, she is a court lady. Her name was Pernikae. Between them, a baby, a son, an heir. His name is Menhebu-Snofru. And then it is mentioned that they all lived in the city of Jesnofru. The city of Jesnofru is a huge city which once adjoined the pyramid of Snofru in Midum. Somewhere among these fields here at the pyramid in Midum lived these people who existed in the city of Jesnofru of the Lord. You pass by the sea of destruction, and your enemy is defeated. Do you rise from the abode of light, or do you rest in the horizon of the west? Your heavenly mother's hands are behind you in protection. Your enemy's sphinx is being overthrown. Your hands have touched the mountains of man, and your greatness has become revered, having taken root in what you were yesterday. The souls of the West draw you to the ways of those who are sacred. You illuminate the faces of the guardians of another world. You raise up those who have been forsaken. You will give my soul to be among your companions when your rays pour on my chest. You will make me rest in the abode created by me, just as it is done for the one who was righteous on earth, for the poet Nia, the righteous one. Glory be to you, Amen. The second Nafur in giving praise to Ra, when he rose up and until he rests in life, the priest Moab, he looked at Firmin, the righteous one, and said, Greetings to you, O sun, when you rise up in the east of the sky, and about the pacification of your beauty. I have come to glorify your beauty, to glorify your greatness constantly. I gave movement to your boat when you shone like the king of the gods. My hands, under the sacrifice of the whole eye, sacrifice the truth, will create the pacification of her greatness and the greatness of the evening boat. So Ra arrives, the wind along the way every day. Next to him is this wonderful pyramidion, the top of the tomb with the image of the sun god. I praise the sun when its rays pour on my chest. An amazing language, and 2 stone statues of the 15th and a little later century BC, which are worth reading. When you read, they start talking to you, and suddenly you realize that the monument, which did not seem completely external to you, contains absolutely amazing things. We are moving to the last zone. These are the tombs themselves. And here in the centre, in the dark, lies this wonderful mummy of a woman in a very beautiful golden mask. Now, 1 second, I'll tell you about the mummy. So, what data do we have about this mummy? The 1st century of the new era, already quite late, not for Egypt, in the necropolis of Hawara, in Fayum, at a life height of 150 centimetres, 25 years old. And you know, there is a very interesting thing that was established by the Kurchatov Institute. I'll show you her first. The mask is very beautiful. Despite the fact that it is late, she was found with a very strange, impregnated with natron, some formations behind the head. And when detailed tomography studies were done, it turned out that she had an incredibly fashionable hairstyle. And with this hairstyle, her head was removed so that she entered another world. And look how interesting, what eyes. She has copper eyelashes. A rare case, very rarely when this was done. And on the mask itself, here, next to the face, in the area of the cheeks and chin, there is a Ba, which is in front of Osiris, on the head of which there is a solar disk and protective snakes that protect her, and the goddess Maat with the feather of justice and truth between her breasts. Here, now probably it will be better to see, but here's not only this, what she has over her head, what lies next to the mummy, it is called a hypocephalus. This is a round magic disc which in the first millennium BC is placed under the head of the mummy in order to preserve the consciousness and fire of life. And there you can see how the solar disk floats and a red snake butt is developed under it. I did not shoot it on purpose. If you go to the museum, look at the hypocephalus. There is a lot of interesting magic images. Here you can, in this part of the exposition, meet what is associated with the burial. But first of all, at least not the best shot I got. This is the very bat, or the bat of a woman, the very soul that flies to the funeral court. This is a scene of embalming. Part of the overlay is such a cartonnage. Cartonnage is glued layers of papyrus and fabric. Here's the embalming, the spirits, the sacred scarabs. These are vessels with the image of Nile. There are Nile fish, tilapia. There are flowers of water lilies, because this is what is placed in the coffin. There was water in these vessels. Nile water is one of the main symbols of rebirth and regeneration. Amulets in the form of 2 fingers, tepti, which are applied to the mouth of the mummy. This is done by Anubis himself, and once, with 2 fingers, the priest was pulling out the mucus from the mouth of a little baby. As a priest in this world, so in the world of Anubis, who pulls out the mucus so that he could speak, he could breathe. And next to the image of the heart, the head, and fragments of the funerary pillions, massive arches for canopies. I will not stop separately. Here are 4 excellent travertine canopies of the 7th and 6th centuries BC. They are here and in bags on the throne. Nocherate, salt, divine soda and salt, used for purification and embalming. In the centre of this space reigns Anubis, the great ruler, the first lord of the divine canopy, or the one who is on his hill, the great keeper of necropolis. Under him is a whole showcase with the mummies of sacred animals. Not only people, but also animals. Basically, votive offerings, that is, offerings for lunch. When a person came to the temple, he had some kind of request. He brought a gift. So, unfortunately, the beast was killed, embalmed, and then, in the process of certain magic actions, it had to rise in the form of a spirit to the world of heaven and inform the gods about the request of this person. In the necropolis of Saqqara, not far from Memphis, more than 6 million ibises were found in the catacombs, and also falcons, cats, dogs, a huge number. At the same time, do not confuse this with the sacred animals, which were a repetition of the essence of the deity, and who lived in pleasure in the temple and often participated in the oracle, in the temple predictions. I'll show you Anubis again. He's great. By the way, a little secret few people know, he was improperly restored. His tail should hang completely down. There, in fact, the tail section is restored. He once lay with his tail down on a box with buttons that were carried in the divine process. That is, this is an improper restoration of the beginning of the 20th century. Few people know about this. Here is the second showcase of this hall. Here, just on the sacred animals, I'll just show you. Chacals, ibises. In the centre, by the way, on high raised paws, this is not Anubis, this is Duat. This is the god protector of desert roads. This is the god who opens the way. This is the god who leads through space and another world every dead man as he led Anubis. The far left in the large crown is Sebek. This is the god of the wild water, the protector of fish, fishermen, and so on. And in the centre, not in the centre, but also in the left group, next to Sebek, there are baboons, sacred ibises, pavilions, baboons, the god of the moon and wisdom. I'll just show you the cats. Look at these gorgeous cats. There are a lot of cats in the Pushkin Museum. Cats like the one on the right, which is big, is a reliquary. They are hollow inside, and a fragment of the mummies of some famous sacred cat was inserted into them. And then it was a moment of some kind of prayer, lunch, veneration, hawks, falcons, whoever's there, and mummies too. So be sure to see who loves animals. And, you know, at the end of this exhibition, there is a moment of truth, because you go into a small dark hall and there are two of these bodies. The first is Ipanhe, who lived in the period from the 9th to the 8th century BC. This is a cover in which there is a mummy, and that mummy was found in the sarcophagus of Corca. Remember the last sarcophagus of the White Hole? Corca was a man. Everything was written about his family there. Corca was exhibited all his life as a man, as a priest, in the exhibition of the Old and New Museum. And of course, one of the amazing finds that was made by the Kurchatov Institute was that this is a girl, very beautiful. She was only 25 years old. She was also confused between the sarcophagi of antiquity of the 19th century. And when you enter this hall, there is a projection. I will not show you the video on purpose. I don't want a spoiler. I want you to go and see, because it is fantastically well done. When bones, mummies, the way they look, they begin to grow flesh, such living, almost ancient Egyptians appear, who are shocked, look at their bodies and do not understand why you're looking at them. They are horrified at some point and see in this projection that you are standing here. You can see, at least for a moment, absolutely living Egyptians. I made a separate frame with the unnamed one that came from the sarcophagus of Kurka, which once lived on the banks of the Nile. You leave the exhibition through the gallery of Fayum portraits, a great achievement of the synthesis of Greek, Egyptian and Roman culture. More than 30 portraits are kept in the collection of the museum. For the first time, you can see those that have never been exposed. Starting from the oldest, they are sculptural. They look more like statues. This is a portrait of a Roman dating from the 1st century of the new era. This is encaustic. That is, this is a technique of painting with hot wax paints on a wooden plate. Then more and more tempera is mixed into encaustic, and at the end, already in the 3rd century of the new era, tempera portraits appear. I will show just a few. They are unnamed. This beautiful girl has never been exposed, by the way. The famous young man in a golden wreath, already pre-iconic. He is later, he is tempera, he is very flat, already almost. Then there will be winners, including death. I come to the end of our story. It is big. I hope you did not regret that you sat here in this hall. And together with these visitors, we'll look again, time's up, at the sarcophagus of Maha, at his amazing face. They did not just doubt, they hoped. And this hope for eternal life, it sounds through all these monuments. In one of the readings of the Book of the Dead, there is an amazing little dialogue when the owner of the great scroll, the great text, who lived a long life, who believed, who performed rituals, he still has in his heart such a human, such a painful fear. God is sitting in front of him, Atum, the god of the evening sun, and he asks, so how? And he gets the answer, oh Atum, what does it mean that I am going here? After all, there is no water and no air. It is so deep here, so dark and so deserted. God answers him, there is peace and heart, but there is no love enjoyment. I gave enlightenment instead of water, air and love, enjoyment and tranquility of heart instead of bread and beer. Look what I will not give you here to suffer from deprivation.